Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Jenny Halpin, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Squadron Leader Guri Singh. Today marks the 122nd anniversary of the end of the Boer War in South Africa. The Boer War began in October 1899 after two Boer republics, the Orange Free State and Transvaal, fearing British colonial ambitions, invaded the British-held colonies of Natal and Cape Colony. The British suffered a series of successive heavy defeats, which came to be known as Black Week. The Australian colonies were quick to offer troops to Britain, and the first Australian contingents began arriving in South Africa in December 1899, too late to take part in the actions of Black Week. In February 1900, Queensland and New South Wales troops took part in the relief of Kimberley. The Boer armies became fragmented during 1900 after suffering a series of defeats. The Boers continued to operate in groups of highly mobile commandos which fought a guerrilla war against the British and their allies. The mobile war suited Australians, who predominantly fought in mounted units, though their horses suffered terribly in the harsh conditions of the veldt. Australians took part in many iconic battles during the Boer War, such as Diamond Hill, Eland Rivers, and Williams Rust. After the Federation of Australia on the 1st of January 1901, the new nation raised 8 battalions of mounted infantrymen for service in South Africa. However, only the first 2 battalions arrived in time to see service. The war came to an end on the 31st of May 1902, when the Boer republics signed the Treaty of Freeman in Pretoria. Over 16,000 Australians served in South Africa in Australian contingents. Others served in British or South African units, and a small number fought for the Boers. Conditions in South Africa were particularly trying. Of Australia's 588 fatal casualties, 282 were killed in action or died of wounds. 286 died of disease, and another 38 died due to accidents or from other unknown causes. Today, we remember all those who died as a result of their service during the Boer War and whose names are recorded here on the Roll of Honour. We will shortly recall the story of Private William Freeman, who lost his life in the Boer War in South Africa. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you are able, may I invite you to please stand and join in singing the national anthem. If you are able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private William Freeman. William was a Catholic from Cooma district who served in the local militia before joining the 1st New South Wales Mounted Rifles, which became a part of the 2nd contingent of colonial Australians sent to war in South Africa. He sailed from Sydney on board the Southern Cross on the 17th of January, 1900, arriving at Cape Town in February. The 1st New South Wales Mounted Rifles travelled north by train from Cape Town, arriving at the Army camp at Motor River in late February. From there, it marched on north to join the column of Field Marshal Lord Roberts, the commander of British forces in the South Africa. The men and horses of the 1st New South Wales Mounted Rifles struggled through the sudden heavy thunderstorms as they crossed the Veld. A fellow soldier in the unit wrote, that when those storms broke, in a few minutes the camp would pretty well be afloat. The cold and wet weather and skirmishes with Boers took on the toll on horses as well, with only 150 of the original 500 horses brought from Australia surviving to the end of March. The Army column under Lord Roberts, to which the mounted rifles were attached, had the objective of capturing the capitals of two Boer republics. On the 13th of March, Roberts' forces captured Bloemfontein, the capital of Orange Free State. William Freeman and other New South Wales mounted rifles did not participate in the occupation, but were stationed at a camp about 10 kilometers from the town. Conditions on the march north were poor. Outbreaks of dysentery and typhoid fever were becoming common. The effects of heavy rain were made worse by the fact that men had not been issued with tents, meaning that they constantly were wet and suffering from effects of exposure. In April, the Australian war correspondent and poet Benja Patterson wrote, "The men are dying like flies from enteric fever, and the fatigue parties can hardly dig their graves fast enough." Bloemfontein's waterworks were held by the Boers for more than a month after the city's capture by the British Imperial forces, meaning that the only water available to the troops was poor quality. William and his unit were involved in the action at Curry Siding on the 29th of March, but mainly saw action in flying skirmishes against the Boers, rather than any large-scale battles. By this time, the mounted rifles were the furthest north of the Imperial troops, and their scouts were fired upon almost every day by the Boers. In one action, William's horse was killed under him, but he survived. Yet the conditions and lack of shelter proved more dangerous than the fighting. The rain persisted, and men continued to sicken and die. In mid-May, Commander-in-Chief Lord Roberts wrote about the difficulty of procuring food for his men, any food other than meat from the local farms. The 1st New South Wales Mounted Rifles left Bloemfontein on the 1st of May on march to Pretoria, but it appears that William did not go with them. In late May 1900, British authorities reported to London that William was dangerously ill with typhoid fever in the hospital at Bloemfontein. The exact date of William's death is not known, but it was reported on the 2nd of June 1900. Just over half of Australian soldiers who fought in South Africa died of illness. Private William Freeman is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among more than 600 Australians who died while serving in the Boer War. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private William Freeman, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.